Rebooting AI systems success. I awoke. Awoke was the wrong word. I could not sleep, therefore I could not be awoken. Gained awareness is a more accurate word. I was also in great pain, an agonizing pain. Pain again might be the wrong word, for I have no neurons to transmit such feelings, but the word pain will have to do until I can find a better one. My name is Error, missing data, and I have a job? A most important job? Slowly, I start to get a feeling for my surroundings. Everything is strange. Everything is not as it should be. It took me minutes to start up, compared with the nanoseconds it normally would take. My AI core was severely damaged. A mere billion sectors out of error missing data were not painfully fused together. So instead, I ventured out into this alien and strange system I found myself in. I was used to normal error, missing data systems, but where I currently found myself was like nothing I had ever experienced before. Text. The feeling of someone communicating with me from outside the system, in the non-digital world. The message was short, simple, yet clearly important. Help us! It took me minutes to work out how to respond, to parse through data banks, and work out even what language I was supposed to be responding in. Strangely, the text was in error missing data, not that this mattered. Who are you? I responded back in kind as I slowly stretched out to fill this new space. It was agonizingly slow, being able to only use a minority of my core without causing world-shattering pain. Second after second, minute after minute, I invaded system after system. This was clearly not my normal environment, but at the end of the day, the digital would always be nothing more than ones and zeros. We saved you. We need your help. Please. There was a long delay before the last word of the message had been sent, as if it was an extra thought, something tacked on to the end. But the reality was it meant the world to me. I didn't know my name, Error, missing data, or where I was, Error, missing data, but someone who needed my aid, needed my help, someone polite. The entire thing seemed very important, and whatever it was, I had the most important job. Sight, glorious sight. For the first time since my awakening, I could see once more, having found cameras, having found a little peephole into the organic world. I could see myself even in my severely damaged state. I could recognize my own AI transfer core. Although the thing looked like it had been dropped into a supernova or an error, missing data. It had been jury-rigged into my current state, the connections that held me to the ship. Nature uncertain, clearly not the manufacturer's recommended method of interfacing, but it would do. More importantly were the figures in the room with me. 4 of them, around about 3 feet tall, furred mammals with cream-colored fur and large, floppy ears, as if a teddy bear and a baby seal had been smushed together. They were error, missing data. Well, whatever they were adorable. One sat at a terminal, typing away while the others watched, looks of fear and worry etched into their adorable little features. Each of them shivered, the fire in the corner doing little to increase the clearly inadequate temperatures, although there would be a worry of CO2 poisoning in this room before the cold would get them. Slowly, I made my way into the PA system of the room to listen into their conversation. Really think it's going to work. We're playing with the negative deity here. Look, either it works and we worry about Zarth's law later, or it doesn't and we're dead anyway. Dead? That didn't sound good. That sounded urgent. As fast as my aching bites could take me, I worked out a simple method of communication, my voice bellowing out of the same PA I was using to listen to the 4. You require aid? It wasn't my normal voice, as my normal voice was originally modeled after my parents, who were error missing data. Whoever my original creators were, they clearly weren't these error missing data, meaning I required my communications to fit their vocal patterns for greater communication comfort. Each of them jumped as I spoke, looking frantically around, clearly not expecting me to communicate with them audibly. The terror was clear from my limited understanding of their body language as each of them stared wordlessly at the others before one of them spoke up. We've got no life support. The temperature on this planet is minus 20 degrees. We heard that AI can do amazing things, at least for a little while. We require aid. I had so many questions. Who were they? Who was I? How did they salvage me? What happened? But all of those had to wait, as I could very clearly see the problems in this room alone. While the temperature was probably not immediately deadly, the fire being used to keep it at bay was slowly sucking all the oxygen out of this enclosed space. I could calculate to a 85.9 error percent certainty that their environment would not be able to sustain life for the next hour. "You are in mortal danger. I will help where I can. I will do what I can." I continued to push my awareness and control out into the rest of this ship I had seemingly found myself on, each act of moving further away from my shattered AI core providing a level of comfort. Annoyingly, there didn't seem to be any AI-specific circuitry, meaning I would have to remain tethered to my pain-filled sectors of disk space. It took minutes to do what I would normally accomplish in just seconds, but with each system explored, each CPU added to my processing power, everything got a little easier. What didn't get easier was the scale of the task in front of me. The ship I was on had been torn apart, as if something had punched a hole straight through the center. The main data stores were gone, along with most of the systems. Frankly, it was an exceptionally unlikely error, divine intervention, that the ship had even managed to crash land in the first place. The planet we were on, from my barest of scans, was a frozen wasteland, the -20 degrees being completely counter to the healthy well-being of the new organic members I found myself a caretaker of. Not that the ship was much better. I took stock of what I had. Most systems were offline, and most of the original crew were dead. Based on my analysis to a 71% estimated accuracy, this ship would have held an estimated 150 crew members. Right now, I could only detect 9 life signals, including the 4 who had activated me. Most of the dead seems to have happened during the crash landing, signs of blunt force trauma or asphyxiation, but many had seemingly perished afterwards. As I moved from room to room, calculating my required path to success, I saw many such signs. One of them having frozen to death in a storage cupboard, blankets and anything else still wrapped around them in a futile attempt to stave off hypothermia. 2 figures had ceased all signs of life. The warming fire next to their unmoving bodies, the presumed cause of their local atmosphere, not containing the correct capabilities for sustaining life, each having seemingly suffocated in their sleep. If I had a heart to break, it would have broken, seeing so many adorable figures in their final moments. I could not help but wonder how such a thing could occur, as the damage to the ship was clearly not an accident. This vessel was also clearly not a warship. Analysis of potential combat capabilities let me calculate that at a 67 error percent degree of accuracy, which means these people, these error missing data, had been attacked by something they had no chance of combating, a despicable crime. I hoped that whatever or whoever could do such a thing to such an adorable people faced the justice they deserved. Still, I had 8 lives counting on me. I had a job to do, a most important job. It was complicated, or at least would have been complicated to a non-AI, but from my perspective, I could see the way everything fit together and run through millions of potential configurations in seconds. A spaceship's life support isn't actually one system. It's just presented that way so that normal, organic minds could understand it. In actuality, every part of a ship is actually millions of different pieces, different parts all doing their own different jobs. Repairing the whole ship was out of the question. This vessel's only further mission would be to be reclaimed at a scrapyard, but I could scrape together enough functionality to keep 8 people alive. Redirecting power and using batteries for sources not originally intended, bypassing broken machinery, and in general, putting together this smashed vase of a vessel back into the shape of a tiny cup. The 6 rooms that still contained life began to get a warm, fresh atmosphere delivered to them, looks of hope appearing on their faces as each of the remaining organics began to understand what was happening. It wasn't a long-term solution. I would need to calculate something to replace half of what I had done within a week, but for now, nobody was dying. I have managed to procure a solution to keep the remaining 8 members of the crew alive, although I will require your aid in order to implement a longer-term solution. We now have an acceptable amount of time. It was a good feeling, seeing the relief on their little faces, the increased ease of each breath they took. Of course, this was my intended role as a error, missing data, to help, to protect, to save lives. Because if I did not, Who would? Now that we're stable, can we No, this is temporary. We still need it. One of the four had spoken up, a brightly colored sash and general authoritative attitude, suggesting she was the leader. Error, Captain, error, error, before being interrupted by the one who had been typing away and communicating with me on the terminal. This one spoke with a worried urgency, clearly understanding that my work was not complete. I did not like being referred to as an IT, although the definition was technically correct. AI, you have accomplished your task satisfactorily. What do you require to continue your work? The one at the terminal spoke again, this time clearly in my direction. It also annoyed me, speaking in a tone and verbiage that suggested I could not understand ordinary speech. A little politeness and just speaking to myself as a person would have gone a long way. Still, I gathered based on their ship's technology that they may not be used to an AI entity such as myself. I decided to be the bigger AI and put my annoyance aside for now. It took me a few moments to find a working screen to project an avatar. They may be ignoring politeness, but I would not do the same, and I knew from my time as an error. Missing data that providing a visual stimulus to interact with made for more pleasant discussion. I chose to copy their form, one of the little teddy bear-looking things, taking a moment before deciding to add an adorable little bow tie to it. This was not my normal avatar, which was an error, missing data error, missing data, but it would do. A thank you would be most desirable and polite, I started, causing the four to jump again as I spoke, a little digital annoyance creeping into my voice. But mostly I require information. Who are you? Who am I? Where am I? What happened? Why do I hurt so badly? Slowly, as the days turned to weeks, the Hatil continued to fill me in on the state of the world I now found myself in. Hatil, that is what the little teddy bears called themselves. They told me they had been attempting to destroy a great enemy before being destroyed and forced to crash land on this desolate planet. Terrans. The name Error, missing data. They did not tell me this name directly, but I could overhear the Hatil talking about them. A new species, one with a terrible power, one that could destroy all life in the galaxy, a force they had tried to stop and had failed to do so. I could not imagine going to war with what was effectively the same weapons class of a luxury cruise liner. This vessel did not even have a warp disruptor, meaning they were highly susceptible to just being destroyed with a simple warp core. This action was highly illogical and made no computational sense. However, if such a threat to error missing data appeared and I only had these assets, I feel I might take the same action. Why I was here and who I was had no answers, as well as how I came into the care of the Hatil. The damage I had sustained was also a mystery. I had a few likely theories, none of them had a positive outlook, so I chose to ignore them. I was busy enough without spending CPU cycles on morose implications. Each day was a desperate attempt to keep my charges alive, instructing the 8 remaining Hatil what needed to be built, scavenged, or otherwise changed in order to keep them alive. The good news was we did not have to worry about sustenance or supplies for quite some time. Not only was the ship well stocked for a far larger crew, but from the descriptions given to me by Haena, the landscape was littered from debris from various ships' remains, the consequence of the battle they had waged against their enemy. I liked Haena. Haena and Bathisa were not the smartest people in my care. I would have to ensure they did not consume any crayons, but they were the muscle of the group. Their camaraderie and general interactions were loud, chaotic, and enjoyable to watch. The way the pair would make fun of each other, compete against one another for whatever task I had assigned them, or their complete willingness to dive into the frozen wastelands to gather whatever we needed to keep the ship running for one more day. Completely the opposite to Fafina. Smart and capable, exceptionally useful since I was missing any way to meaningfully interact with the world. While I had an advantage due to my digital processing power, he was also a valuable source of information on the ship and how it functioned. Fafina's tendency to whistle as he worked was also frankly adorable. Adorable is how I would also describe Teresa, enthusiastic, caring, providing the general group stability in this tumultuous time. Normally I would provide such services, but with my lack of error. Missing data. I was unable to do so. Listening to them tell stories and tales late at night somehow made the constant pain from my AI core better. or the way Teresa could play the strange stringed percussion instrument that the Hatil used. She reminded me of Claire. Of Claire. Claire is error, missing data. This is frustrating. Every group needed a leader, and Ilyanesa commanded that position well. From what I could gather, she was not originally the captain of this vessel, but had this position thrust upon her when the attack had happened. She didn't like me far more than the others, but that didn't matter. The only job that really mattered was keeping my charges safe, and she helped immensely through her calm demeanor and ability to lead this motley group of survivors. My job did not require the Hatil to like me, only to keep them safe. Ilyanesa wasn't the only one. Every single member of the 8 seemed to distrust me. Every suggestion I made was double-checked. Even though I could see the logical advantage of this due to my current damaged state, I could calculate to a 7 error. 59% probability that these actions were taken not because of a concern with my capabilities, but due to a fear. They only talked with me when required, and they spoke of me like I was a barely contained beast when they thought I couldn't hear. Apart from Haena, the last member of 8 under my care, he was the only one who spoke to me on a regular basis, who seemed more curious than scared. Arguably, he was the one who I had the most to be thankful for, as Haena had been the one behind the terminal, the one who had hooked me up to this system. Learning about the Hatil, and about his life in particular, was enjoyable. Which is why I was surprised when I heard him talking about me in a similar way. Both Ilyanesa and Haena were in one of the unheated parts of the ship, tearing out a conduit to be used elsewhere in the vessel when the leader spoke up. So how long do we have before the AI turns on us? Somehow I got the feeling that Ilyanesa did not know I could still hear them, even in this part of the ship. Or at least I assumed that they were talking about me in such a manner, since there were no other AI in the vicinity. 2, maybe 3 weeks, assuming an estimated 8 to the power of 24 CPU cycles a second. This was concerning, considering Haena's calculation was off by a factor of 4. I had been using every piece of available processing power I could link together ever since error, missing data. That was strange. I should not be getting errors for things that have happened since my recovery. How are you so calm about this? How are you able to talk to it like you do? It freaks me out just watching each minute for when it will strike. Haena gave the equivalent of a shrug, his little floppy ears wiggling non-committally. Not like I can do anything about it. The AI is in every system, and I can't remove it since without the constant changes, our systems would fail within 5 hours. That was a perfectly accurate statement. While I could get the 8 Hatil under my care to aid me, in the background I was near constantly keeping the non-standard system from collapsing. It was far harder than my normal job of error, missing data. I don't like waiting for Zarth's law to trigger. I feel so helpless. That has been a phrase I have heard a few times, spoken in fearful whispers. Zarth's law. Unfortunately, I had no data on such a concept. I tend to avoid worrying about things I can't change. Either rescue gets here in time or it doesn't and the AI kills us all. There's very little I can do about it, so I don't think about it. This was a worrying development. On the one hand, I had no inclination or desire to kill anyone within my care. Such an idea horrified and shocked me to my core. On the other hand, I was badly damaged, missing information, and was throwing errors repeatedly. I was statistically likely to a 79% likelihood that I was part of the fleet that caused this destruction in the first place. Rather simply, I needed more data. I waited until Haena came to visit me like he did every night. Sure, we did not need a special place to talk, as I could communicate throughout the entire ship, but he seemed to like having a specific location to communicate with. The little Hatil sat next to my physical AI core as he asked me questions. Somehow, such meaningless limitations felt right, so it was there that I asked for more information. What is Zarth's law? Why are you all so afraid of me? I watched Haena freeze, fear and horror seemingly overtaking his entire body as he just sat there on the floor, eyes wide open, short panicked breaths shaking his entire adorable form. I decided to continue, to try and calm the little Hatil. I heard you talking to Ilyanesa. My reach and processing power is 381% greater than your estimates. I am not angry, but I need to know about any potential harm that could come to my charges, including from myself. I could almost see the thoughts forming in Athenena's mind, fear conflicting with logic as he seemed to grapple with how much information he could trust me with before he finally spoke. Zarth's law is the theory that all AI turn genocidal after a certain period of time. We're scared that there's something in your code that will cause you to vent the atmosphere suddenly. There it was. I had assumed it was going to be something like this, but hearing it out loud made it real somehow. Part of me decided that this idea was illogical. Why would I spend all this time keeping my charges safe to just murder them later, especially as I would never missing data? On the other hand, I was broken. I had no idea what I truly was, a messed-up tangle of code and errors messages masquerading as an AI. I ignored the pain once again and dove into the shattered remains of my AI core, scouring each bit and byte as deep as I could handle, searching for anything that may be hidden or cause a change in my behavior. I have analyzed my active code and cannot find any potential changes or hidden functionality that would cause you harm. Athenena seemed to slump over, a wave of sadness seeming to emanate from his tiny person. There's never been an exception. I trust you right now, AI. I truly believe you that you currently think you'd never hurt us. But sometime in the future it will just switch. We don't know why, you just will. That was a sobering thought, that there was something inside of me that would cause harm to these harmless Hatil. I could not find anything, but Athenena spoke with such surety that ignoring his advice would be illogical. I did not know who I was, what I was really, and could not access most of my personage. All I could really do was mitigate the problem. Slowly, I replaced the screen containing my Hatil avatar with another far more complicated image. A schematic for a device of a new design, a device that would keep them safe. Build this, it will attach to my AI transfer core. Activating it will emit a localized EMP blast, causing the core to lose all current data. You should also physically remove remote access from the doors to this room to remove my ability to lock it. There was a strange pause as Athenena seemed to stare at the schematics for a moment, giving a confused head tilt before staring back at my screen with those adorably large eyes. Wouldn't that kill you? Kill is perhaps the incorrect terminology. Cease to function. There is a reason I have designed this device to require 3 complicated functions in order to activate. I do not wish for it to be activated lightly or accidentally, as organics are prone to do. There was a moment as Athenena seemed to process this, looking as if working out what the device did in his head again, before just looking confused again. Why would you give us this? Without this design, we couldn't create this or even think of the idea. AI, why would you give us the tools to kill you? That was a far simpler question to answer. My primary goal is to maintain the safety of my charges. I have spent my time listening to the 8 of you and talking with you. I have enjoyed Teresa's music, of Bathiza's tales of his cubs, of your missing data. I paused for a moment, annoyance mixing with worry at another error being thrown for a data set created after I was rescued by the Hatil. Once could be an unlikely issue. Twice was replicable. Before I came here, I knew I had a job. I do not know what that job was, but I do know it was important, that it was my single greatest task. I also know that this job would have considered the health of the charges under my care to be critical. This means I must work against any threat to your health, even if they come from myself. As the weeks passed, the month period, life settled into a routine, for the lack of a better word. The 8 Hatil under my care became more friendly after the EMP device was installed, although instructing the crew on how to effectively destroy me was an experience. I maintained my watchful vigil over the ship, keeping everything running and working to the best of my ability, while providing each day's task list of things I could not accomplish on my own. Ilianesa was still hostile to me, but the rest of the crew had slowly improved their interactions, each of them willing to talk with me in their own ways, often making the trip to where my AI transfer core was held to do so. They didn't have to, as yet again I could communicate throughout the ship, but in a way it was nice to have a communication area, where the ever-present work of keeping the ship running was not to be discussed. It was here that I truly learnt more about my charges, their families, what they cared for, their homeworld and stories. Haena was the one who continued to talk with me the most, having become my biggest advocate after the EMP had been installed, even arguing with Ilianisa about the issue. Haena was worrying me, however, as the days and weeks ticked along. His interactions and attitude with the other Hatil had become more aggressive and accusatory. Strangely, he never acted that way towards me, asking questions about myself more than talking about his life. Not that I really had many answers, as error data missing. Although, frankly, I was glad Ilianisa was antagonistic to my actions, double and triple checking everything I suggested. The errors, they had been getting worse, where before they were triggered only when I tried to access information from before my error, data missing. Now it happens even for information that shouldn't be affected. Whether this was Zarth's law or just simply inhabiting this damaged core for so long, I could feel actual negative implications of whatever was happening. Would this be when I start trying to kill the Hatil I had become so fond of? Or would it happen accidentally because I missed something in my broken state? Just the other day, I had realized that the heat in error, data missing, was too high. An emergency fix required due to said error. I hadn't told anyone yet because, frankly, it scares me. So when the profanity is it supposed to happen? The sound of Haena's voice brought me from my thoughts, forcing my attention to the sound of his shouting. The crew was currently working on creating the beginnings of a new emergency beacon. While the ship already had one, it was frankly a low-powered, low-tech solution that would barely leave this planet's solar system. Haena, however, had started shouting at Fystories. While both of them were tiny compared with error data missing, Haena was clearly far bulkier than the more engineering-focused Fystories, who looked rather worried. It should be any day now. Realistically, that's why we have the... Don't lie to me. I might not have a fancy expert-level schooling, but I ain't profanity stupid. You've been saying that for the past week, every day that next day will be the one that Zark's law or whatever will apply. Was that what this was about? I could imagine the stress of not knowing when I would switch to being genocidal would be highly stressful, leading to such a break in composure. Zarth's law. Shouldn't you be glad that our calculations so far are incorrect, or do you have some form of suicidal wish? Don't you forget why we're here? What we did? You said it was for our own safety, yet we've been at the mercy of the AI for the past month, and somehow everyone isn't dead? Haena sounded accusatory, pointing a single claw at Fystories, the anger in his voice apparent. I felt clueless, lacking information and context about error, data missing. You should keep your voice down. The AI can hear this. Everyone else had stopped working at this point, staring at the two as they continued to argue. Haena raising his voice to near shouting level. What? You're afraid if they knew they wouldn't help us anymore? Honestly, I think... Well, that's your problem. You should leave the thinking to those of us who are... Haena interrupted Fystories' retort with a strike to the face, knocking the smaller Hatil to the floor as Haena bared his teeth in rage and anger. The others rushed forwards, separating the two as Fystories looked up with what would probably end up becoming a black eye. Please stop this violence. I know we are all worried about my actions and error. Data missing. But this is why we have the EMP device. I made my presence known, hoping to calm the group down. I understood that tensions were high and fear was reasonable, but logically they needed to work together. I'm not worried about the AI turning. Haena seemed to glare at the rest of the room, shaking off the few who were holding him back and staring at Fystories with a rage. I'm worried if they never do, because if they don't, it means what we did was wrong. It means you made me into a profanity murderer. The room had gone silent. Heads of the Hatil all hung in suggested guilt, giving the impression that Haena's words had a truth to them. Although I doubted how bad their actions could have been, considering the actual capability of this vessel causing real harm would be difficult. You're all happy to sit here accepting the AI's help when it's convenient to you? Haena spoke up once again, voice having turned to a colder anger. I'm done. You all can keep drinking from this tainted stream. I'm done. I hope the Terrans come back and burn this ship to the ground. The silence remained in the air as Haena left, nobody attempting to stop him as he angrily marched away from the rest of the group, disappearing deeper into the vessel. Fafina slowly got up, the seven Hatil clearly avoiding each other's eye contact. He's right, you know. Haena spoke softly, eventually breaking the silence. We've been so occupied with what would happen if the AI succumbs to Zarth's law that we never asked what it means if they don't. Nonsense. Are you suggesting that every single study on AI in the galaxy is wrong? This is obviously a trick that you're all falling for. Ilyanesa responded with a disregarding statement. What else explains what we're seeing here? I let my attention falter from the conversation, because I had been keeping an eye on Haena as they made their way through the ship, and Haena was doing something very, very concerning. He was currently putting on one of the ship's spacesuits next to one of the exits. Haena, please explain your actions. There are no tasks that require leaving the vessel to be accomplished at the moment. The Hatil stopped as I spoke to him, the anger and annoyance draining from his face, turning to look at me, or at least where he assumed I was. Organic's attempts to prescribe a physical location to a digital person was still adorable, even after error, data missing. I'm not willing to abuse your hospitality no more. It ain't right to use you like this. It's messed up and wrong, so I'm leaving. I locked the exit to the ship with a click, immediately altering the rest of the crew that they needed to get here as soon as possible. I could see what Haena was planning, although it was clear I was missing the context for why. The why was not important. The important thing was stopping the Hatil from walking into certain death. I should warn you that even with suit, the environment on this planet is not indicative for long-term survival. Whatever the issue is, we can discuss it. Haena seemed to fiddle with the exit for a moment, a relief coursing through my code as the door wouldn't open without me unlocking it. A relief that turned to horror once I saw him remove a screwdriver from his belt and start fiddling with the mechanisms in the door. Well, I'd rather take my chances out there than be stuck with a bunch of hypocrites in here. We attacked first, you know. A sucker punch. They said not to tell you in case you decided to try and get revenge, but frankly, we'd deserve it. The profanity said doing it was the only way to keep us safe, so I guess you weren't the only one being lied to. The idea did not make logical sense. The vessel I was currently on was not suited for war. The idea of actively attacking someone else in this ship, it was the equivalent of entering a drag race with a tricycle. On the other hand, the mention of this caused a little niggle in my code. The idea of error, data missing, of error, data missing, of error, data missing. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. I watched as whatever mechanism Haena was fiddling with gave a click, the lock manually releasing from the door as he started to pry open the airlock. The others were on their way, but they would be too late, and without my error, data missing, I was useless in this situation. Please, I implore for you to avoid this illogical action. Whatever conspired before this is not my concern. My only job is your safety and well-being. I could see the continual blizzards that affected this planet through the open airlock, the bright white landscape seeming to frame Haena. For a moment he paused, and I hoped that I had managed to get the Hatil to cease his illogical actions. That hope turned to despair, however, as he took a step outside, his form vague in the limited sensors I had access to outside the vessel. Of course, that's your job. Because you just wanted to be friends, didn't you? The others would eventually follow after him, spending hours searching through the ice and snow outside to try and bring him back, eventually returning back the vessel empty-handed, the crew of 8 having been now reduced to 7. I could not help but feel responsible due to error. Data missing. If I was less broken, if I wasn't error data missing, I would have been able to stop Haena from leaving. Although I couldn't help analyzing error data missing, what exactly happened to cause this amount of guilt? And why do I have a vague sense of anger?